Alright, new developer, new console, yes, a new game. After a long while, Sony trusted the Sanzaru first with the trilogy on HD version on PS3 that we covered, and afterward an entire new game, following up the twist of at the end of on the third title about going through time. That in itself might not be too much of a stretch because the series like Crash kind of had a kind of jumping point after you explored enough of the world. You want to go like in a unseen dimension, that kind of front.
Music cutting out.
It's a good observation, Dweebs. This is because much like with games like Prince of Persia, The Forgotten Sands HD, this game brings autosave, which means on a couple of times the music will cut out when the game is autosaving because this is a digital purchase that I did, and once again I'm afraid my console is basically on its last legs. So bear with it, folks.
So
yeah, sometimes it's not even revolving around that because the original PS4 version of Beyond Two Souls slightly freezes for a bit when it's autosaving, even without promise for the console itself. Sometimes it can even be just the game.
Now, to get things out of the way,
I love how it asks you if you want the full story.
Yeah, it's basically a recap. In case you're not caught up with the trilogy yet. So fair enough, I guess. And it's not like it's just a clip show. It actually provides an actual narration from Sly and an actual new animation instead of recycling from the previous games.
Story begins.
I should probably just start at the beginning.
Of course.
The name's Sly Cooper, and I'm a thief from a long line of thieves. In fact,
the good
is the family business.
Yeah. Again, they're gonna be
Although
sporadic.
until recently, I considered myself retired.
Yes,
Having
yes,
hung
you did.
up my mask and cane, I was enjoying life.
Someone lied
on
to
the
you
other
and
side
decide to
of
lie
the
back.
In the company of a
They're made for
certain
each other.
Ooh,
And here's
handcuffs.
one major problem that I will mention later. Someone in development team at Sanzaru really loves Carmelita.
So I should mention our current
I
situation
love how
was
she
only
came with
possible
handcuffs
because she
there.
thought
That
I
implies
had
they have a
amnesia.
very active love life.
Okay, that I'm not judging, Jova. No king shaming.
He's judging the furries who developed the game.
But as time went on, the old itch came back. I knew.
I should probably see a doctor about that.
Okay, this is also a bit weird, because I honestly got the idea from the whole faking the amnesia thing, but Sly really did not had the passion for thieving actually, extinct, and then it just came out of nowhere again. I thought the idea was that it was just a cover-up and he always stole in the meantime, just for his kings.
I really do get the feeling that there was a bit of disconnect between this game and the previous three games writing-wise, which is weird.
Well, okay, I can tell you this, Jova, I have no idea who the writer of this is. Also, yeah, Bentley reunion, which, fair enough, I guess. It's just that, and once again, compared to the ending of the previous game, it's a bit rushed.
Yeah, I think my biggest issue with the narrative is the sense of disconnect, but more on that later.
But this is mostly to just set up the first iceberg we're gonna get. Someone is smuggling stuff in the museum and tries to get it. But now we need to get to the main gimmick of what this entire game is about. If you remember, Bentley was developing something called a time machine along with Penelope, which also received, a beauty upgrade.
Great design.
Everyone kind of did. Like, the art style is drastically
Bentley
different.
is the most consistent, I have to say, even though they do something later on that I think they should have never done, but it's for a way later part. But yeah, at some point, Penelope kind of just disappeared.
I'm sure that won't come back into play later.
So that's one of our main mysteries, finding Penelope, but sadly more urgent matters are at hand.
The Master Thief's Handbook passed down through the Cooper family for generations.
Okay.
This poor book had everything. It was torn apart from the Finnish 5. It was probably already consumed by the writing for, the centuries, and now it's getting erased Back to the Future style.
Okay.
Whole book.
I'm just gonna say it. I feel like the book thing should have been what called Sly back into action, not just some contrived itch out of nowhere, which pretty much gets interrupted anyway by the book.
That is a good point, too.
Jova, I thought You,
The
you
first
Joker,
thing
I
Bentley
thought you were
did
going to
was track
say the
down
book
Murray,
is the
the
best
third in the
character.
trio. Murray was our enforcer,
Okay,
the
this
muscle.
other bit.
And the guy
At the beginning
who
of the
eaten all the
previous
cookies we
game,
stole
if you
back in the
remember,
orphanage
like I said,
days.
Murray got
Through the
into
years,
the
the three of us
demolition
have become
derby
an
business
unbeatable
thanks to
team.
his van,
We were more like
but
a
he still
family
remained
now
in
than a
touch with
gang.
Bentley. So getting him back to the gang like this
Murray had been living
immediately
his dream on
is
the pro
something that I
driving
can
circuit,
get
where his
totally
van had
behind.
become
You know,
famous, or rather infamous.
the thing
for
that
all
has
the
to be
crashes
questioned a
he
bit
caused.
more is
Eventually,
Murray's
he was unable to find a
redesign.
sponsor due
It's
to his
clearly
high
different
insurance
from
premiums,
the
and he
Sucker
moved to the
Punch
demolition
games.
derby, where he remained
Okay, I will say
undefeated.
this: the first impression obviously
When
is
Bentley
not
showed up,
great,
however,
but as
Murray
the game
dropped
goes on,
everything
it's
to
something
help
that you
out.
kinda get used to it. It's a bit hard to
Especially when
describe.
Bentley explained that his
What
van
is
was the
your
key
main
to the
issue with
whole
Murray's
plan.
redesign in this
With
one?
Carmelita
Because
distracted
I'll
by
admit
new
his is
Okay.
one of the
I took
redesigns
the
I'm actually
opportunity to
more
slip
okay
away
with,
and
but
met up with the guys
It's
at our
weird.
Musketeers
It's
hideout.
not bad like the one of the
Bentley
of the
launched into one of his
prototype of a
elaborate
movie trailer.
presentations,
That
and I
one
saw the
was a
whole
bit hideous,
scary
but
picture.
more on that later.
Someone
Because
or something was
yeah.
literally
this is a pretty lengthy
erasing
intro
Cooper
cutscene,
history.
not gonna lie.
Then, to our
to be
amazement,
fair, again,
Bentley
they need to
revealed
set
that
up
he
fast things
already
up,
had
and
the
it's good
solution.
animation with some in
Time
Flash,
travel.
so I'm all for
It
it.
turns out his
Yeah,
top
people are
secret project was
split on the
constructing a
animation of
time
these
machine.
cutscenes. I'm not
And
too
now
bugged
he
by
modified the
them,
design to
but
fit
I
into
do wonder
Murray's
if maybe
van.
the major issue people have with the cutscenes
We were
was
going to
once
travel
again
back in
it
time,
being an extension
stop
of
those
the very
responsible,
weird
and
art
fix the
style change. It's
damage
like,
they'd
let me put it
done.
like this. Even a good art style can be very, very
Bentley explained
jarring
the
to
only
people
catch
who are,
was
well,
that in order to
used to
travel
another
a
art
particular
style. For
time,
example,
the machine
imagine
required
if
an
per
object
se,
from
you know,
that
a series
era.
whose little art
We
style was
knew
being
from the
black and
changes to the
white
devious
was suddenly
raccoonist
turned
that
into
our first stop
gorgeous-looking
was feudal
anime
Japan.
stuff. Like,
So here
sure,
Okay, if
it's
there's a good in-story
About to steal a
explanation, I
priceless
guess it can
17th
work,
century
but
samurai
I get the
dagger
idea
from
that
the
you're
same museum
examining
behind
a,
the
you know, an
casing.
example where it just
Funny how
happens
things work out
because.
sometimes.
exactly, yeah. I do feel like they could have maybe have gone a bit more into trying to make this more consistent with the Sucker Punch games, but to be fair, the art
Okay.
style is just the tip of the iceberg.
First, okay, also
Ah,
some
that's
Easter egg
cute.
logo. First, other positive thing. First, Peter McConnell is back in the composing seat, and his soundtrack is arguably to me the best in the entire franchise. He has once again an entire orchestra to tinker with, and he goes above and beyond. Second, the voice actors for the main trio all come back, and they sound just as they left from the third game. So it's a neat piece of consistency. Carmelita, like I said, instead will have a different voice actress, but more on her later.
So,
Doesn't she have a different voice actress then?
I will say the lighting seems a bit weird here, but okay. So, basically, this game came out in 2013. That's right, eight years after Sly Cooper 3.
And at the tail end of a PS3, mind you.
Weird timing, but okay. To say there was anticipation for this game would be, well, an understatement. There was loads of hype, marketing, and, well, consider the re-release trilogy released by Sanzaru to have been part of the push for this, especially since they added a little bit of an extra thing in the trilogy that hinted towards this game. As you recall,
I even also show it to the mini games, but they weren't that much worth to be shown.
And they the soundtracks moved on from PS2 MIDI.
Well, okay, to be fair, there was some kind of instrumental. I don't know how much difference there was, but I can tell that at least the third game had some kind of instrumental in it. But I argue, yes, this soundtrack actually sounds great, and the tracks themselves actually do sound great.
So
But
just-
let me explain quickly
sorry, go on.
the gameplay, because some stuff have changed. First, the way Sly moves is pretty much identical. You have the run button and, normally walk and everything. The triangle gives you that kind of push, but on ground it can be charged for like a spin attack for some reason. The rest is pretty much the same. So more on that when it comes along. Go ahead, Jova.
So yeah, again, despite a few bumps in the road with the marketing, including a very, very terrible looking beta, which everyone
Yeah,
and their
that was a
mother
thing.
critiqued.
Honestly,
don't worry,
it was kind of a Sonic design kind of situation for the movie because it worked for the better. Sanzaro actually did took the complaints to a heart, and decided to actually change the design. The slide looked a bit more brownish on his first design for some reason.
That was weird.
But this new design that he actually has in the game, it's much more consistent to the one of the previous games, and almost identical. It's an ideal modern evolution for how the character should look like.
So like I said, despite a few bumps in the road with the marketing, the hype was definitely there by the time this game came out. So, the game released on February 15, 2013 in North America, and people were kind of middle of the road about it. At best, mind you. Some people freaking hated it. That being said, sales-wise, I'm not quite sure how it did sales-wise, but I will say this, the end result, we have not gotten a new Sly Cooper game since 2013.
It was more of a, it was more of a combination of things. First, like you said, the sales were not optimal. Regardless of the actual number, clearly not as much as probably someone was expecting them to be. Second, this was around the same time this was competing against Puppeteer and The Last of Us. Take that from what you want. Third, this was also around the time where Sony was becoming a bit stingy with experimental studios that were doing different things, like Superbot with the PlayStation Stars Battle Royale. So the moment the game did not meet the expectation, they decided to drop it.
Not only that, Tia, this is when Sony were doing the very controversial move of shying away from their more cartoony mascots.
To be fair, Jovan, that's a sentiment that can be argued that is being going.
Okay. Alright, any cartoony IP that isn't named Ratchet and Clank.
Well, okay. There's a discussion for it to be made when we actually get to those games. But let me just say this: that was a sentiment that, like I said, seemed to have stemmed already from the beginning of the PS3 era. But like Dibs also mentioned, it's kinda inconsistent as well, which honestly muddles the thing altogether. So I want to save it for another time. For the purpose of this game, essentially this was the franchise being given another chance, and ever since the only thing that we got was a teaser for a movie that never came, then supposedly being reconverted into a series, but we haven't heard a thing since.
Wait, so, that thing's getting converted into a series? Jesus.
Supposedly that's what we're doing, but again, I just don't think it's gonna happen. Anything is gonna happen.
Well, that's the thing. What happened was, after this game didn't do all that well, along with the rather split reception, there were quite a lot of things got axed. There was going to be a DLC episode.
I'm gonna mention it later, Dweebs, because it's tied to actually also the ending, Dweebs. So
that's all I was going to say about that a little bit. There was going to be a DLC episode, but that got axed. The movie was announced, but the Ratchet and Clank movie turning out to be a disaster paid to that.
Yes.
And then they tried to turn that film into a TV show, but that was axed as well. And as for Sanzaru themselves, if they ever wanted to try and continue from where they left off, that was paid by Facebook when they were bought by them in 2020.
That's also another thing. Sanzaru time and time again did mention that they had a script already ready for a fifth game, but it was only requiring Sony's approval. But essentially, time and time passed again, they still made games technically. Apparently, the VR stuff that they did is pretty good, particularly the one set around Nordic mythology. But now they're being bought by Facebook.
What are Facebook even planning with them?
I don't even, the moment someone will come with an answer, I'll be the first to get to know. Okay, but anyway, let me mention this. Pickpocketing comes back with new type of items given to each guard, and in fact you even get a trophy for stealing one item of a kind, in the entirety of the game. So it's a good thing. As soon as you see something, hippity-hoppity, get that thing into your property.
So, we're here to try and answer the question, why did this game not do so well? Because, okay, I will be honest. I definitely have my problems with it,
also,
but it's not...
Sneak peek for the villains. Go on, Jova, don't worry.
I don't really care for this game, but I'll admit, I find it weird that this is apparently the series' franchise killer. That being said, we're here to try and answer the question to that. I will bullet point some things that probably played into mind to it. 1, the game did not live up to its advertising. You can like or love this game, but there are a lot of areas where it did not live up to its advertising. That does not send
There's another problem that we didn't mention, by the way. The fact, like Theo said, it released at the very last year of this particular console generation. By this point, a lot of people were gearing towards the next gen. and probably this game kind of slipped in through the cracks.
One-
There's a lot of game because unless it's like a big major release, because remember Sly Cooper, like you yourself said, Jova, at this point was 8 years in hiatus. So by this point, only the hardcore fan base really was paying much attention to this game by this point.
Also, let me mention quickly, the collectible we just got is a new one introduced, the Sly Mask. Collect all of them to unlock extras similar to how you get the skill point in Ratchet & Clank games. I will show them at the end.
But yeah, I think it's weird though because people are definitely hungering for more cartoony stuff to come from Sony. It's just that you have to wonder, do you think this would have actually been a better project to do the whole cross-gen thing with, like have this
They
be...
actually did it between PS3 and PS Vita. Remember, experimental era, this was the moment Sony was trying to experiment cross-gen between the PS3 and PS Vita. And mind you, I still commend the effort. Using the PS Vita, you can actually make your life easier for other things in this game. But more on that on the gameplay section for another time, because Sly now has to steal that particular katana that serves for the first major time travel. More on that later, because now it's time to take control of Bentley. Let me say this, I really like this new design, because it incorporates the wheelchair from the third game, but with the Explorer head from the second game, which is a unique compromise. The controls of Bentley have remained pretty much the same. The only thing that has changed substantially is that the wheelchair, instead of having a triple jump, now it has a prolonged jump if you keep holding the X button, and now it has prolonged arms that make stuff like stealing much better, and also throwing bombs. But otherwise, it basically remains the same. Bentley shoots tranquilizer darts, throws bombs of any kind, and they just improved on those fronts. Go on, Jova.
So, ignoring the fact that maybe this wasn't given at the best price point or, the best time to sell the game, one has to wonder another thing, though. Fans who played this game aren't really too much, fans of it. I mean, that's not to say that, they regard it as, like, the Sonic 06 of the franchise, but... yeah, I've not really heard much people say positive stuff about this game in general. The most I've heard them say is the gameplay is decent. However, as for why people may not really care for this game, I'm willing to point towards the narrative, because if there's one thing I will definitely go out of my way to say is bad, it is the narrative of this game. But dissecting that does require us going a bit further in.
Like I said in some of the previous games and parts, I think if the game just had a better writer, a lot of the issue that stems from this probably would have been better accepted at the very least. The problem is that again, I just have no idea who this writer is.
Really?
The primary problem, Sly fans, myself included, with this fourth game is the fact that like the script, because here's the thing. Yes, the gameplay is decent. Yes, like Jova said. No, I'm not trying to take that away from the game. The gameplay is fine, and the music is really good, like Theo said. It's just that the truth of the matter is that the hardcore Sly Cooper fans love this series, and one of their big reasons is actually the characters. And let's just say the writing in this game handles them in a way that's, let's just say, problematic. But that's awesome.
Not only that, but despite the gameplay being decent, it's by no means the series' best. I'd argue that other Sly games have performed better gameplay-wise than this game.
I beg to disagree a bit, because again, it only improves on the formula that 2 and 3 established. Now, on the also Mission Impossible reference, on the performance level, I can imagine that, because while the game tries to stick on a natural 60 FPS, much like the original trilogy, there are multiple points where the frame rate will dip. And sadly, this is not one of those games that Sony was kind enough to give a remaster on the PS4.
Like, I'll admit, even though I don't care for this game, part of me does feel like maybe Sony could have at least tried to have given it another shot on the PS4.
Don't let me get even started with the PS2 backward compatibility program that Sony had, because for some reason after Jack and Dexter it just stopped.
Yeah.
Like, you think they will do that for the other Trinity, the rest of the Trinity, or at the very least Ratchet and Clank? Again, Rift Apart, as while we're recording, is literally about to come out, and you're banking on the fact that a lot of fans, don't have a consistent mean of playing the previous games. But even this, honestly, this is one of those PS3 games that do really benefit in terms of performance.
Yeah.
Not as much, mind you, in terms of priority, not as much as something like, say, Ebony Sword or Folklore. Those really should take a bit of precedence, but nonetheless, a re-release of that trilogy that Sanzaru did and this one could potentially benefit, and honestly would be a better announcement to be made instead of just having a new game, but I don't know. We'll have to see what happens, to be honest, because Sony has already a couple of import releases to be done, and the pandemic, of course, scrambled things all together. But to mention quickly, the major hacking minigame is still there. For Sheer is the Light, they actually toned down the sound effect of shooting, and they also bothered to give a bit of variety. For example, Bentley's normal green shell vehicle can fire normal projectile and can carry key, but there will be vehicle variants that can do different things. So again, Sanzaru did understood what the original games did in changing the gameplay style and trying to up a bit the formula to make it more entertaining, and less grading onto the player.
And before anyone mentions it, yes, I do know that technically a game was released after Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, Bentley's Hat Pack.
The minigame collection, which is fine, but not really commentary-worthy material.
But yeah,
anyway, go on,
I will admit, like I said, even though I don't care for this game, I do feel like it's a bit of a shame that this game, unfortunately, has to go down as essentially the franchise killer until a new game is made, because...
I can tell you this, Jovan, at least in my country, this game is actually well regarded. Everyone who I know that actually has played it views it basically in a positive way.
Well, you know what? More power to you guys. I may not personally like it, but I won't deny that there are things to like about this game. In fact, again, the ideas behind it are not bad, it's mainly the execution. And you know what? I mean, stuff like this, stuff like how the hacking minigame has been upgraded to the point where you can have all these different weapons and whatnot is cool as well. So, yeah, let it not be said that this game is completely bad. That said, at the end of the day, I do still consider it an utter disappointment, and I'm not surprised that a lot of fans did not want to buy it.
Okay, now it's time to control Murray, and a couple of things have changed gameplay-wise. A lot of his moves, surprisingly, for some reason, have been straight cut away, like the bouncing ball move, for some reason. That was kind of the entire point, that he gained, new piece in the third game, but whatever. To be fair, it's still fine. It's the more combat-oriented, it works, so the value prop is still there, the punching has some new interesting moves. It's just the weirdness comes from the fact of the things that got cut away from his usual moveset. This is also because of how a bit more streamlined all the characters are. Instead of having a big set of power-ups that you have to design and assign to the L1, R1, and R2 button, if I recall correctly. Instead, each character has a small selection that you have to choose in between, say, 5 or 6, and all of your attacks are based on that particular power-up. Like, say, Bentley has power-ups based on, say, sleeping gas, so all the darts and all the bombs are set to sleep. Subsequently, if instead is standard explosive, the darts too will be explosive. It's a way to simplify things, but it has its downsides, I have to say.
Yeah, again, this is where I come from with people saying that the gameplay does not feel like the best of the series in that sense. Sure, it's playable and decent, but it is arguable that in some ways it feels not as fun in the sense well, sure, it's more streamlined than straightforward, but the characters don't always feel as unique as you would want them to be, and it is weird some of the stuff that they did remove from previous games as well. They either removed them or just gave their abilities to other characters.
To something else. Yeah. Speaking of which, the added member of the Cooper gang in the third game do not return in playable form. Some of them are present in the game already mentioned. Hello. But basically they're replaced by another type of gimmick, which we'll see from the next part or the one afterward. But one thing that instead was added here, which was kind of a custom, because games like God of War paved up, is cuties. They're not much, but they are present in the game, and occasionally they're given to reflect like a particular cutscene that goes on. Sometimes they're tied to some particular mini games, which makes things work a bit better because simply they're relatively more simple. So assigning them to QT is making more sense. However, this is one of the games where I do have issues with some of the QTs, but for that we have to wait to the very last part of that.
All in due time. But
anyway, yeah, also the throwing mechanic comes back, throwing object, but for some reason we also gave these new mechanic pressing triangle as Murray throwing down the object instead of throwing it at the target. I mean, it can work, it's just I didn't see the point of that. Anyway, let's steal. Why not? I'm really stealing it. There you go.
Why would you leave your calling card?
And problem number 1. They gave Carmelita a miniskirt. This is dumb.
Also, they pretty much turned her top into a bra now.
Pretty much. That being said, she's voiced by now what I think is the best actress.
Grey Griffin?
Yeah, Grey Delisle, aka Grey Griffin.
AKA Azula.
She does nail the Mexican-Spanish accent that Carmelita is supposed to have, and injects the character with enough personality. So I'm technically fine with that. If a new product gets to be released, I'm totally fine with her coming back.
That said, I'll admit I'm not a fan of the game once again bringing back Sly and Carmelita's old dynamic of being at each other's throats because, well, Sly Cooper couldn't just explain.
To be fair, the game will try to have a kind of a story arc on that, but like I mentioned at the end of Honor Among Thieves, if you were hoping for some kind of arguing or resolution about the weird shit that happened in the end of the game, between Carmelita and Sly, tough luck. The game will barely touch upon it. Because we're just too immersed in this time travel plot.
And the game cannot seem to decide if we're supposed to decide with Carmelita or Sly in regards to this, but again, that is for later.
Alright, the time machine, as Bentley said, works with a catalyst, so all you need to do is, you guessed it, reach 88 miles per hour. And yeah, the time machine design for the van does feel nice, our actual evolution. Also, we have a title.
Oh, wow, the time travel was so powerful it revealed the logo.
Yes. Also, we lost the license plate.
As you can see, our relationship is complicated.
No shit.
I just succeeded in upgrading it to hazardous. I certainly wasn't expecting her to crash the party. She'd been so busy with her latest case, I never thought she'd have her eye on me. In fact, I'd kind of been counting on it. But then,
and yet you left your calling card for some reason. What did you think was going to happen?
And she destroyed equipment.
People doing...
That's fine.
And now, I had a lot of explaining to do. But the plan was in motion, and there was no stopping now.
All in due time.
Even though I was thinking I'd need the time machine just to patch things up.
Especially because also Carmelita is gonna have some business. And here's another thing. If you watch the trailers, you will know that Dimitri was supposed to have at least a speaking role. And yes, he does something in this game. He holds the fort. Here's the thing. I don't know what kind of development shit happens, but Dimitri does not speak in the game. Does not actually voice lines, even though his voice actor is credited in the credits. It's always gonna be the narration of Sly or someone else saying, Dimitri told us this and we answering like that. And to be fair, he's still in character, as you can see. They just did not have voicing lines in the actual game? I don't know.
Was it like that other game we did where they lost all the voice dialogue?
Well,
no, I don't really think it's like that.
Did they just forget to put it in?
No, again, that's the weird thing. The only explanation that I can think of is that the voice actor did not manage to finish all the recording lines, and so they had to do something. I don't know.
It's
Yes,
like
Noah?
it's like I said. This is part of the issues with the game not living up to its advertising. It suggested Dimitri was going to be more involved in the plot, and fans of Dimitri were excited for that. Then imagine being a fan of Dimitri and finding out that he doesn't even get a speaking role, let alone even get to do as much in the plot. Like, not the best start. But hey, there's much more down the line. later.
Especially because we're about to enter our first time zone, which is actually one of my favorites, feudal Japan, in order to see what happened with one of the best ancestors in the entire game, Ryoichi Cooper.
Feudal
so
Japan,
tune in for
Tio.
that.
Ubisoft told me nothing interesting has happened
Something
in feudal
Assassin's
Japan.
Creed. See you for part 2.
See ya.
Yeah.